I was sent a video this morning. It's a video with a wide circulation that seems set to send large numbers of people on a rather hysterical wild goose chase. There's plenty of real stuff to be concerned about in today's Britain, not least the government's eugenics agenda, without getting wrapped up in wild goose chases. I don't doubt that Chris, the guy who made the video, is sincere, and so rather than have a go at somebody who seems completely honest and well-meaning, I'm putting this response video out partly to stop a misguided campaign and partly to give Chris a perspective that he might not yet have. I think I'm the right bloke to do this because it's obvious I'm not an apologist for the current government. I have a long-term interest in rights and the balance between individual rights and the rights of society to protect itself. And as a long-time mental health professional, I know a thing or two about consent and treatment. So, here's the video. I've linked it at the bottom of the page on YouTube as well, so you can check that I'm not being unfair to Chris, with whom I have no issue except that I think he's mistaken.
Hello everybody. Today we're going to talk about our rights when it comes to having a mandatory vaccine. The UK COVID laws were changed just before all this kind of kicked off, and one of the words that was used was mandatory vaccination, so I wanted to have a look into see what that meant. Mandatory usually means an order of some kind, and when it comes to communicable events, I wanted to know what that meant, really. So I went and found a British Journal of Medical Practitioners article, and it says the right to consent, is it absolute? So that's what you're looking for if you want to look this up. It has a legal framework, and it reads, a medical intervention without valid informed consent is a criminal offence, and the physician can be charged with battery. Examples of such situations include treatment against the patient's will, different treatment than the one consented for, and treatment after consenting deliberately with wrong information. And this is governed by the General Medical Council. So, that's the understanding of informed consent. You have to be told the correct information, the side effects, everything that's associated with it, everything that you want to know about it, and give your consent knowing all of that. If they've lied to you, if they do it without your permission, they've committed a criminal offence. Okay.
There are, and have been for many years, various routes to treatment. One is informed consent. Another is best interests in relation to people who lack the capacity to give or withhold consent for themselves, and another long-standing route is compulsion. This applies in cases where the risk to others is significant and includes diseases such as rabies or certain mental health situations. That's why we don't have rabies here in UK. It's also why we'd pretty much won the fight against tuberculosis until decades of neoliberalism under the Tories and New Labour created the conditions it needed to thrive again. This legislation is just more of the same. There's nothing new or particularly sinister here.
Okay, that's how it was before the Covid-19 happened. Then it talks about what happens about protecting the public against infectious diseases, which Covid-19 is one. Okay, and things slightly start to change now. In order to protect the public from contagious infectious diseases, the Public Health Control of Disease Act 1984 regulates notification of diseases and mandatory treatment of conditions such as tuberculosis. The individual's rights to consent is severely restricted in two areas. Firstly, information about the patient's diagnosis has to be given to the relevant authorities, so that's confidentiality. So if you wanted to talk to a doctor in confidence, that's gone out the window now because they can discuss you with anybody.
Anybody is not the same as relevant authority. Once again, there's nothing new here. This is absolutely in line with existing legislation. It's just been updated to incorporate Covid-19, which is easily as severe a problem for public health as tuberculosis.
Secondly, patients suffering from communicable diseases can be forced to take their medication by supervised administration or involuntary inpatient treatment. So you can be forced to take your medication. That's a vaccine. And it cites here that in the North Manchester General Hospital, the act was used to prevent the spread of TB to the wider public by forcing treatment onto an individual who was not compliant.
Sometimes we need to make hard societal choices. Rights of the individual need to be balanced against the rights of everybody else. If I have Covid-19 and want to go and spread it around, how would you feel if your granny got it and died as a result? You see, it's one thing to consider my rights in isolation, but that's not how the world works. My right to refuse treatment must be balanced against Grandma's right to avoid an early grave.
So I looked up the Control of Disease Act 1984 and I printed, just to let you know that the first thing that will strike you when you look up this act on the government website is that it says changes to legislation. And this has been updated on the 27th of April 2020, so just a day or so ago, and it's come into force on that day. So this is applicable from now. This is in operation now.
Here we agree. Boris's Enabling Act gave him the power to enact changes like this without reference to Parliament and implement them as he wishes without scrutiny. I've spoken about this before. It's no different from the power-grabbing legislation Adolf Hitler used once he achieved a Nazi Party majority in the Reichstag, and Boris did exactly the same thing almost immediately after gaining his overall majority in December 2019. But that doesn't mean that this particular change is wrong, however it came about.
These orders can be given by a Justice of the Peace in relation to a person. If they suspect a person to be infected or contaminated, i.e. haven't had a vaccine.
Oh, Chris, infected or contaminated does not mean haven't had a vaccine. I haven't had a vaccine, but there's no evidence that I'm infected or contaminated. We used the example of TB earlier. There are plenty of people who haven't been inoculated against TB for one reason or another, but they're not infected or contaminated. I'm sure Chris isn't doing this intentionally, but he's conflating two very different things here, which from my perspective, as a health professional, really don't equate. It's what's known as a false equivocation. Don't be fooled by it.
The infection or contamination is one which prevents and could present significant harm to human health. There is a risk that the person might infect or contaminate others, and it's necessary to make the order in order to remove and reduce the risk. Okay, so that's why they're doing it.
Once again, the task is to balance individual rights against the rights of society to protect itself. Granny's right to avoid an early grave, in other words.
So what happens to us? So we have to submit to a medical examination. We can be removed to a hospital or other suitable establishment, taken from your home and taken to a hospital or other detention centre area. Be detained in a hospital or other suitable establishment. So that's what they've just said, is that inpatient treatment, but this is saying you can be detained. And there's a bit more detail later on explaining that.
Risk to others is one of the three reasons we use to justify detaining people under the Mental Health Act. The risk of unmitigated contagion with Covid-19 is way more dangerous than the majority of people detained under the Mental Health Act. This is a long-established principle of public health that far outweighs the right of an individual anti-vaxxer or libertarian with a fuck you fetish towards the rest of society.
To be kept in isolation or quarantine, you may be disinfected or contaminated. A person wear protective clothing, so that's like an all-in-one jumpsuit, like in Guantanamo Bay or something.
Guantanamo Bay? What? Now that isn't just an honest mistake, that's deliberate hyperbole. Come on, Chris. Get real.
Person provide information or answer questions about person's health or other circumstances. A person's health be monitored and results reported. A person attending training or advice sessions how to reduce the risk of infecting or contaminating others. Well, that's room 101, isn't it? You know, re-education.
More hyperbole. Room 101 is a reference to the book 1984 by George Orwell. a dystopian totalitarian state in which re-education was conducted by the Ministry of Truth using torture to instill a completely false political agenda into the minds of its unfortunate victims. What we're talking about is health promotion, a long-established, long-standing and vital part of public health services. This is health education, something even Florence Nightingale advocated for when she said, "It is my belief that one day there will be no nurses of the sick, only nurses of the well."
Which you'll be subjected to. A person be subjected to restrictions on where a person goes or whom they associate with, and a person abstains from work or trading. And then it goes on essentially to talk about, again, sort of risk to human health and what have you. So they keep repeating that.
Because that's the point. We're a social species. We inhabit the same spaces. We need to consider Grandma's right to avoid an early grave alongside your right to go to the chippy. Chris then goes on a bit about property that may be contaminated and how contact with property can be incorporated in contact tracing. There's a fair bit of hyperbole there too, ending with the extreme example of destroying your home. Bear in mind that this has always been possible, but doesn't happen routinely. I don't know of a single case where a person's home has been destroyed. Decontaminated, yes, but not destroyed. There's a difference between what public health officials can do and what they routinely implement. And remember, none of this happens at all unless the person is so minded to ignore the rights and needs of others to avoid a disease that, despite government playing down the figures, has been responsible for over 60,000 UK deaths so far. That's more than the entire Blitz. This legislation is necessary, even though the vast majority of people will never come into contact with it because they'll cooperate in the spirit of the public good. But I stress again, none of these principles are new, and all of them are expressions of the need to balance individual rights against the risk of widespread harm.
So let's talk about enforcement. So what happens how do you commit a crime now? A person commits an offence if the person fails without reasonable excuse to comply with restriction or requirement imposed by the order, willfully obstructs anyone acting in the execution of the order. So if you say, no, you don't want the vaccine, they can't deliver the vaccine to you, you commit an offence. You have to be violent, you don't have to... all you have to do is fail to give a reasonable excuse. Why don't you want it? Because I don't know what's in it. You're having it. No, I'm not. You commit an offence straight away. Willful obstruction is just trying to stop them from delivering it to people, I guess, or you yourself, so you commit an offence again.
That word, reasonable, is important here. And bear in mind that nobody has said having the vaccine is an issue here, except Chris. He said he'd come across the notion at the start, but didn't say where. And nothing in the legislation mentions vaccination, only infection or contamination, which are very different. I'm sorry, Chris, but you're creating a false equivocation again. You're also failing to understand that refusal to comply with any legislation is an offence, as is willful obstruction of a legally empowered officer of the court. And it always has been. At least within living memory, it's not about what you say. If I say no, I won't allow you to swab my throat, but then I go ahead and allow it, there's no offence. It's about what you do.
And that's a £5,000 fine, or up to a £5,000 fine. And each day that doesn't get paid off that fine, they are allowed to add more debt onto you.
The legal tariff exists to ensure maximum fines, not necessarily to set minimum fines. And the additional amount of £50 per day is for continuing the offence, not for non-payment. That's dealt with in other ways, including making arrangements to pay in instalments. Come on, Chris. You may well be honestly mistaken about the argument itself, but the text regarding fines is pretty clear.
But they can also, the court has the power to impose a requirement that a person be detained or kept in isolation or quarantined in a place. So they can detain you, this is part of the thing, indefinitely.
Well, of course it's indefinite. The court doesn't know in advance how long it will take for you to be free of the virus. Definitely doesn't mean forever. It means until it's safe in this context.
It takes a judge to get you out. The person leaves that place contrary to the requirement. A constable may take the person into custody and return the person to that place. They can arrest you off the street, take you to the police station, into custody, then take you to a hospital. That's disappearing people. Your family won't know where you've gone. You won't know where you are. You'll arrive in a hospital or one of these detention centres.
No, it's not. I have many years of experience of this kind of thing. In my context, it's Section 136 of the Mental Health Act, which came into force in 1983. This is the power to arrest people who, by virtue of mental disorder, are a risk to themselves, to others, or at risk because of self-neglect. They're picked up off the streets, taken to a place of safety, and ultimately hospital, as you describe. And the process, by law, involves notifying relatives and ensuring that the person is not just disappeared. Sorry, Chris, but this really is becoming tinfoil hat territory now.
Do you have the right to prosecute? No, you don't. They have given themselves a get-out-jail-free card, so you can't even prosecute them. So if you're wealthy, you can't take them to court. In fact, you can't take the relevant health protection authority to court, or anyone who's administered anything or anything to do with it, basically.
This is a little more complicated to explain. Essentially, it's true that nobody can be prosecuted for not breaking the law. So any health professional or officer of the court who does what the law requires them to do cannot be prosecuted for that terrible crime of not breaking the law. It used to be that if the law was unjust, then citizens could take the UK itself to court and appeal to the European Court of Justice or the European Court of Human Rights, but that's not really an option anymore, thanks to Brexit. So, you're right. But who would you prosecute, given that everybody has acted lawfully? Also, why? Would you prosecute someone for acting in the public interest by preventing the spread of a deadly virus?
And it says here, and final, but last but not least, Crown property and Her Majesty. This law does not affect them. It only affects you. So, please sign up to www.govote.org.uk to vote for the independent testing of any COVID vaccine that they produce, because if this is mandatory, this is what we're going to have to deal with. Yeah? So at least you want to know that it's safe, that it's actually not going to harm you, it's not going to give you cancers, it's not going to make you infertile, there's no additives in there, because otherwise you're going to commit an offence by saying you don't want it, or you're going to question it. So go to www.govote.org.uk and please vote. We need 10,000 votes to get this in front of Parliament. So it'd be great if we could get more. Thanks for watching, and please share this because people need to know what the Control of Disease Act is all about and the powers that they can force on you and the rights that you don't have anymore. Thank you for watching.
Vaccination is not currently mandatory. However, even if it did become so, and I accept that it might, is this stance of yours really comparable with the risk that your neighbours would be subjected to as a result of your misguided point of principle? There's plenty to have a go at this government about. There are plenty of real human rights abuses to challenge. But this... Come on, Chris. This is just good sense writ large. Our rights mean nothing if we're dead.